Did you know what the primary attachment strategy actually is of a fearful avoidant and why? See, a lot of people know an anxious attachment style, they're constantly wanting to maintain proximity and closeness, so they activate all the time. Dismissive avoidants constantly need to protect their freedom and independence, so they deactivate all the time. And they minimize their attachment needs from others. But what about the fearful avoidant? Because this is something we haven't talked about nearly enough on this channel. And in particular, why knowing this will completely revolutionize the way you see relationships, either as a fearful avoidant or with one. So in today's video, we are going to talk about how a very specific set of childhood experiences shapes every fearful avoidant, especially when it comes to the way they attach and connect with others. And we're going to cover three major points that talk about the root cause of these childhood experiences and what the childhood often was like for a fearful avoidant attachment style. And then we're going to talk about what to do, what to know, and how can this actually apply to changing the way that you do relationships. And most importantly, as we go through some of these key concepts about the childhood of a fearful avoidant attachment style, I'm going to share with you a really powerful exercise at the end, something that I hope will actually change the trajectory of how you operate in relationships in the future and completely change the way you see yourself and how you're doing relationships to begin with. So first and foremost, one of the things you need to know is, well, the anxious attachment style, they activate. The dismissive avoidant, they deactivate in their relationships. The fearful avoidant attachment style, their attachment strategy is hypervigilance. And what this means and how this actually relates back to probably the type of childhood they had that we're going to really unpack here in a second is hypervigilance essentially means constantly reading between the lines, walking on eggshells, being hyper attuned to social cues, microexpressions, body language, tone of voice, any changes in patterns. And why do you think this happens? Well, it's because fearful avoidance grew up in a childhood where nothing was predictable or safe. And sometimes it's physical safety. The vast majority of the time, it's a lack of emotional safety. And so a fearful avoidant learns to guard against this. Now, let's break down a few examples. And I'm curious if you are a fearful avoidant listening or watching, if this has been your childhood experiences, and you're welcome to share in the comments what some of your childhood experiences were like. And you'll see this really start to come together. So basically, every fearful avoidant, and keep in mind here, right, that yes, your attachment style can develop later in life. You could be anxiously attached, for example, get into a 20-year relationship with somebody with narcissistic personality disorder and leave that relationship a fearful avoidant, right? Our attachment style is our set of conditioning, right? How we fire and wire neural pathways over time. It's not like fixed for life. Hence why there's this channel and we talk about how to change your attachment style to become secure. But for most of you who grew up as a fearful avoidant attachment style, you probably see some of these crucial ingredients. Number one, there was chaos. And chaos can be things like you had to constantly move around. You never got to really get integrated and trust your environment. And it was like never knowing where the stability was going to come from and just feeling a lot of confusion. But in the vast majority of cases, it's more chaos in the home. So chaos in the home because perhaps both of your parents are struggling with substance use issues or alcoholism. And in these types of cases, what you're going to see is like you never know what version of a parent you're going to get. Maybe it's your mom who's an alcoholic. Maybe one day mom comes home and she's in a great mood and she's really sweet. She's had a few drinks, but she's happy, go lucky. Other times, mom's had a few drinks and she's angry and she's cruel and she's volatile and it's very confusing. And maybe sometimes mom is trying to sober up the day after, drinking way too much the night before, and she feels guilty and she's kind of kind and a little more sweet and thoughtful. And other times mom's sobering up and she's literally detoxing and has a terrible hangover and she is angry and bitter and frustrated and just taking out that anger on you. And in those types of cases, it's like you never know what version of mom you're going to get. And it's not just alcohol or substances. It could be either of those things. It could also be that you live in a household where your parents fight like crazy and you never know coming home from school. Is there going to be a huge fight breaking out? Do I have to walk on eggshells? How can I stop it from happening? And maybe you feel constantly pulled in the middle. Other things that can cause fearful avoidant attachment style in childhood are things like, seeing your parents go through a really ugly divorce and you constantly being told things about one parent from the other and vice versa, and you never know where the truth is or what the truth is. All of these types of things will cause you to feel like the only way to try to figure out how to attach or connect is to try to do the guesswork, is to try to read into every little detail really deeply so that you can try to predict. If you can see when mom walks in the door as an alcoholic, and you can tell in the moment she walks in based on her facial expression and how she's moving that, oh, she's been drinking today. She's not in a good mood. To go to your room and hide. Or if you see that mom's kind of sweet, but she's a little too drunk and she needs some help, okay, here she is. Let me figure out how I'm going to adapt to this situation. Maybe I'll take care of her and then I'll get my needs met and get love. All of these types of occurrences and events. And for some people, it's a lot more extreme than this. These are just some common themes that I've heard over the years from many, many people. It could also be by the way that you have a parent who has narcissistic personality disorder or antisocial personality disorder, and there's love bombing followed by profound putting down. And again, you just never know what version of a parent you're going to get. All of these things cause the fearful avoidant to go, okay, the only way I can trust my environment at all is if I know all of the points of data, if I gather every little tiny detail as much as I can to try to predict what's going to happen and keep myself safe. And so this makes you, yes, probably an expert at reading between the lines, probably an expert at thinking 3 steps ahead and trying to predict the future. But the downsides of this experience is that it conditions you with a deeply innate lack of trust, both in people, the environment, and as a result, in yourself. Because so often what it means to grow up in an environment like this is that you have to betray your own boundaries, your own truth, your own needs, and even your own feelings just to try to adapt to that environment. Let's look at an example. Let's keep that same analogy running. Let's say that you have a parent who's an alcoholic, and maybe you are recovering emotionally from the day before and how they treated you. But today you see they need help. They drank way too much. They're passed out. You might go, okay, well, who cares about what I feel about this right now? Who cares about how I was treated yesterday, that I was screamed at or called names? Instead, I have to go pick this parent off the ground and drag them into their bed and make sure that they can try to sleep, try to get them some water so they don't get sick. And, there's this element of like, you don't get your feelings seen, heard, considered. Another example, let's say your parents are fighting like crazy and they take their anger out on you, but then it's a day later and you can see there's tension, another fight's going to break out. You don't get to think about how you're feeling and what you need or what your boundaries are or space you need from your parents. Instead, it's like, wait, get in the middle, get involved, try to stop this from happening. Make sure that both people are feeling emotionally catered to, try to diffuse it as much as you can. The burden of responsibility on a child who grows up as a fearful avoidant is quite great, whether it's parentification, whether it's all the caretaking involved, but all of these things cause you as a byproduct to have to betray yourself to deal with that environment. And so you often wonder as an adult why it is that you struggle so deeply to trust. What is it about, you that makes it so hard that when you get into a relationship and things get real or things get serious, your mind starts to spiral and think of all of the what ifs? Or maybe one day you're all in and another day you're completely feeling uninvolved and divested from the relationship and you're hot and cold and going back and forth through these extremes. Well, of course you are, because those extremes that you're going through now are simply the conditioned patterns of your childhood repeating themselves. You see, if you only got exposed to the vast majority of the time, loving behavior, extremely negative behavior, and it seemed like there was no middle ground, no way to settle into peace or safety or harmony or stability in your home, your subconscious mind gathers all this information and says, well, this is going to be what all relationships are like. And so the moment you invest in somebody deeply and you feel vulnerable as an adult, the way you felt vulnerable as a child, your subconscious conditioning comes up. It's guided by association. And so all these patterns come to the surface. Wait, things are good today, but they're going to be bad tomorrow. Constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop, constantly walking on eggshells. I mean, it makes perfect sense. So what you have to be able to do is first recognize this and realize it's not your fault. It's simply your conditioning, but also realize that only you can really change it. Only you can be the one that puts in the work. And sure, that can be with support from others. That can be through counseling or therapy. That can be through coming into the personal development school. We have all of our programs based around this for fearful avoidance. But you have to be the one to be like, I am not going to let my childhood conditioning shape every relationship I have as an adult when I get really close. And I'm going to learn to rewire that conditioning because remember, your conditioning is not fixed. You're not born as a fearful avoidant. Through repetition and emotion, which is what fires and wires neural pathways, this gets conditioned into you. And you can rewire what is not serving. It's something I've done as a former fearful avoidant, a former very strong fearful avoidant. And it's a little bit of work. It's not like an overnight process. You need to show up consistently, but it is some of the most important work you'll probably ever do because it doesn't just impact your external relationships. It impacts the relationship you have to yourself because ultimately your attachment style is that. It's the relationship you have to yourself first, and that will go with you everywhere, into your friendships, into your co-working relationships, your other family relationships, your romantic relationships, your relationships with your kids one day. So all of these things are so important to note. And you heal by becoming your own parent. So I want to do an exercise with you here, if you are the fearful avoidant. And I'm hoping that this exercise will bring you some good realizations, okay? This is just an aha moment exercise. This is sort of like a breakthrough exercise. If you want to go much deeper into this, we have a whole course dedicated to this that you can check out fully for free for a limited time called the Emotional Mastery and Belief Reprogramming course. It's part of our program for healing fearful avoidant attachment style and to secure attachment. And it's fully free, just for a limited time because it's Valentine's Day month. We do a 14-day free trial once or twice a year. So it's on right now. And you can check it out further if you'd like to. I'll put the link down below. But let's just start here, okay? If you feel comfortable, and this can even just be like if you're driving or listening, but if you feel comfortable, I suggest you pause the video and write this down, or you can always sort of do the mental work now and come back and do this deeper in a little bit. But take a look at, what are the biggest things? So there's an old quote by Dr. Gabor Mate. I think it's one of my favorite quotes. He says, trauma are the things that happened that shouldn't have happened, and the things that didn't happen that should have happened. And what this means, right, is trauma are the things that happened that shouldn't have happened. So your parents shouldn't have been a raging alcoholic in a perfect world. That just wouldn't have happened, right? But, and this is an example, but trauma is also the things that you just deeply needed as a child that children need and they yearn for and they're wired for but couldn't get. So trauma can also be neglect, right? It's the things that didn't happen that should have happened. And so we need to, and this sounds cheesy, but it is the ultimate truth. You want to be able to heal by becoming your own parent. So I want you to sit down and look at both sides, okay? I want you to write 2 columns on your paper. And on one column, I want you to write the things that happened that shouldn't have happened. Okay. So being yelled at, having anger taken out on you, God forbid any type of abuse, try to write out just at a high level, the things that happened that shouldn't have happened. And next to it, in a column next to it, I want you to ask yourself, what did I make this mean about me when I was a child? Because the mind is wired to give meaning because as human beings, we seek some degree of certainty. So if you were getting yelled at all the time, you might have made that mean I'm not good enough. If you were getting, controlled all the time, you might have made that mean I am trapped. If you were getting, put in the middle of things all the time, you might have felt like I am bad unless I caretake for everybody. So what did you make these things mean about you? Or I'm unlovable unless I do these things, right? So what did you make these things mean about you? And I'm curious what comes up. And then I want you to take a logical inventory for a second here. We still have the other side of this to do in a moment, but just notice how these things affect your everyday life. Do you still see yourself feeling like you have to caretake for everybody? Do you still see yourself, for example, feeling like you're not good enough in situations and being, very, very, going to great lengths to overachieve or over earn your worth because of feeling like that? Like, how do you notice these patterns showing up on a daily basis? And spend a little bit of time reflecting on that. And once you have, then we're going to look at the other side of this, which is the things that didn't happen that should have happened. And I want you to look at here, again, write another column down your sheet and ask yourself, what did I always need as a child that I couldn't get? And sometimes it's things like I needed to feel like I could trust my environment. I needed to feel a sense of safety. I needed to feel seen as much as I was trying to see others. I needed to feel like my feelings and needs mattered too. And, as you start to write some of these things out, in your next column, and this is going to be a hard question to ask yourself, but it's going to be a really important, pivotal one to healing. I want you to ask yourself, from 1 to 10, how much do I give these things to myself on an everyday basis in my life now? And generally what you'll see, because this is how trauma works, this is how it imprints the subconscious mind, is that the things that happened that shouldn't have happened, and what that made you believe about yourself, like I'm not good enough, I'm unworthy, I'm unlovable, I'll be rejected, I'm unsafe, I'm trapped, all these things, I'll be betrayed. You're usually replaying those stories all the time now. And that is how your childhood trauma is still with you in the present, because it still lives within your subconscious mind. Okay. Now remember, it can be rewired. That's like the whole premise of what the personal development school is built on, is how to actually address the subconscious mind and leverage neuroplasticity to rewire. The second thing is usually the things that you didn't get access to, you're definitely not giving to yourself as an adult until you start doing the work. So, you see this so obviously in the analogy of a dismissive avoidant. Their feelings are neglected as children. They're like the biggest neglector of their own feelings as an adult. They do anything not to feel. And you'll see this too. You usually see everybody else, but you're not seeing yourself and your feelings and your needs, right? So if you were like, wow, I really needed to be seen and have my feelings and needs, noticed and heard, well, you may be struggling with that as an adult because you were conditioned that way. So these are your patterns. Now, I want you to know that this exercise is a starting point. There's other videos on this channel where we talk about how to recondition these things as well, other resources. But if you do feel like, hey, there's some good work for me to be doing here, then I highly recommend join the 14-day free trial, go through the emotional mastery course and the needs course. If you spend a little bit of time, like 30 minutes, 3 or 4 times a week, you'll have time to get through both. And both will help you actually rewire these things. It's a fully free resource just for a limited time that will help you move the needle and realize none of these things are your fault, but they are your responsibility to heal as an adult. And you absolutely can. It's not even that hard. You just need the right information. So I hope this is helpful for you. I would go so much deeper if I had more time, but obviously, people usually watch about a 10-minute YouTube video. So I hope that free set of resources is helpful. And if you have comments down below, if you have anything you want to share about your childhood, your experiences, or even questions you want to ask about this exercise, I'm going to try to come back here and check this out and try to answer some of those at some point too. So that is it for today. Thank you so much for watching and for stopping by. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, maybe share this video with somebody who could benefit. And I can't wait to see you in future videos. Thank you for watching.